Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Hi. And not morning for some of you. I know we have quite a few people joining from the UK at all sorts of ungodly hours. Welcome. Hey, Sarah. Good to see you here. Look, we're going to give people till about 2 minutes past. We've got people joining on Teams, some people joining on YouTube, and some people joining on Facebook Live. So if I look like I'm looking at a different camera, please forgive me. I'm talking to 2 different groups and just checking the chats in 3 different areas. So please forgive me if I look like I'm distracted. We've got about 180 people signed up today. Normally I find we usually get about a third of that live. So we're ticking up towards that. We've got 54, 55 in here between the various places. So we give everybody 1 more minute. I do sympathize with how very hard it is to fit webinars into our day, but let alone webinars that feel like they're for us rather than for the organization. So I really appreciate that people are here, and we're going to try to get you as much practical takeaways as we can over the next 50, 55 minutes. So, okay, yep, cool. Hi, Sally. Hi, Belinda. Sam, good. Yeah, I hoped you would come along. Good. All right, I'm pleased to see you here. Awesome. Okay, so good morning. It is 2 minutes past, which is my deadline. Welcome to everybody joining on Facebook Live. Welcome to those on YouTube. Welcome to those on Teams. Really good to see you all here, and congratulations on making the tiniest bit of time in your week to prioritize you. So the idea with today is to be as practical as possible, but also to give you as much support as possible. And I know those two things don't feel like they're often the same. One of them can feel a bit soft and fluffy, but we really want to see how we can, as a group of veterinary leaders, do a better job of being there for each other and being a community that supports and buffers one another's really, really challenging jobs. So to crack straight into that, I do want to start off with, you are not alone. Okay. I've been doing work in the resilience in the veterinary industry space for about 8 years now, and I work a lot with teams on their resilience, and I work a lot with leaders on how to not need their teams to be so resilient. And it's really only in the last 6 or 9 months that I'm starting to see this huge gap of, but wait, who's supporting the leaders? We as the leadership team are so aware and so, we just get shoved down our throat, the resilience challenges, the well-being challenges, the mental health challenges, workload issues for our teams. And we spend so much of our own emotional and mental energy and time trying to support that we, as the people propping up everyone else's well-being, nobody seems to be doing anything for us. And I do a lot of coaching with vets. I run leadership masterminds and a few different things. And I am not exaggerating that when I sat down the other day and I actually plugged in some numbers, and this is an anecdotal field of, a few dozen veterinary leaders, but I am not exaggerating when I say that almost 30% of the veterinary leaders that I work with are either on some sort of sick leave because of stress and burnout, or in the process of leaving a job or have just left a job. 30%. I'm not exaggerating. And it just, when I sat down and looked at those numbers, there's a gap. There's something we're not doing to support this group of people. And so this is only a very, very small contribution to that space. But I feel like I do a lot of work in leadership and I do a lot of work in resilience. So I think it's time that we merge the two. This is a new merging, but I hope it will still be really valuable and help you guys get something out of it. So what we're going to cover, I'm going to touch on a little bit of academics. Normally, I am the last person in the world to go into like semantics and give you academic theories. Normally, my whole approach is nobody gives a stuff about what the academics say, what works in the real world. But I think you'll see when we touch on a couple of things why I make an exception today, because there are some things we're getting wrong in the terminology we're using, and it's actually surprisingly important. We're going to do boundaries, not just what does that look like to like leave on time, because we all know the reality of that, but also when we're the emotional dumping ground with our teams and often our families as well. So what does it look like to have boundaries around protecting our, not just their time, but also the mental load element? And I'm going to talk about strategic disengagement, which basically means, guys, stop doing so much. And I know you're all going to go, oh, but I can't. There's all of this stuff I have to do. And I'm hoping by the time we get to that phase, you'll start to believe me that no, you don't have to. And at the end, we're going to do a teeny little bit of fluffy stuff, which is the woo-woo mindset that some people love, some people don't, but I promise it's all backed with science. And at the end, I'll offer any opportunities that if people want any more support, you know where I am. Who am I? Do I have a clue what we're talking about? So I am a Murdoch graduate veterinarian, 2008. Spent the first part of my career locuming around the UK like a total idiot, and basically found out really early that unlike some of the stereotypes of veterinary professionals, I really preferred working with the people stuff than the animal stuff. Go figure. Mainly, I'm just not very good at being a perfectionist, and that appears to be something that people like in a vet, and it wasn't me. So I decided that strategy and vision and people was more my thing. So I've held roles such as the advisor for animal management for the largest animal management unit in the Southern Hemisphere. So kind of the lives and deaths of all of the dogs that we impound, and that, you know, what do we do about all these dogs that are unregistered and all these dogs that are undesexed and all that sort of stuff. I've been the executive manager for RSPCA in Western Australia. I've been the CEO for RSPCA up in Darwin. Obviously roles that come with resilience demands 101, and not in the ways that you would think. You would think, right, that it's like, oh, well, you know, shelter work must be hard. And yeah, the whole playing God part does kind of hurt a little bit, and you do have the mental weight of 1,000 animals at a time in your care, and whether they live or die is up to you, and you get to sign the bottom line, which is a bit overwhelming. But actually, more than the making those decisions, to be honest, it was the then having to defend those decisions to my marketing team, to my inspectorate team, to the shelter team, to the media sometimes, to our Facebook following, to volunteers and foster carers who meant really well and sometimes had these animals in their home but didn't understand how you have to make these decisions for safety and welfare. And definitely the defending of one's decisions was much more exhausting than the making of the decisions. Though, of course, I did have probably something that a lot of you can relate to, what I refer to as decision fatigue, where I would like spend all day making really difficult decisions and then come home and I could not cope with the challenge of what do I eat for dinner. So I put on a lot of weight because I had a lot of McDonald's for dinner, because the decision of making another decision was just overwhelming. I've also had roles, the manager of animal welfare and animal health at Taronga Zoo, which was every bit as fun as you think it would be, though I was in that role when the lions escaped from their enclosure, so there was some resilience requirements there. I'm also dog mum to this old man, and not dog mum to this little chaos monster, solo mum by choice. So sharing the mental load is obviously something that I'm pretty passionate about, which is weird because I don't have anyone to share it with, but I'm still nonetheless really passionate about how we do that for particularly vet mums out there in the rural world. So that's just a little bit about me. More than anything, nobody wants to hear about me, but I promise I get it. I've been the general manager of Perth Veterinary Specialists when culture was toxic and brutal. So yeah, I get it. I know where you are. I know how it feels, and it is just overwhelming. So cracking into it though, what are we actually going to talk about today? So remember I said I was going to talk about some academics, and I apologize in advance for what sounds like semantics, but I promise in the next 7 minutes that I spend on this stuff, you will probably believe me that words matter. So everybody here kind of knows about resilience, right? I don't need to explain that. We're no longer talking about resilience as our parents thought of it, which is be tough, man up, hold the line, you put on a brave face. That is robustness or stoicism, and that is unhelpful. Okay. But it is the basis of a lot of us, how we started thinking about resilience. And so breaking out of those habits really, really are quite difficult. And breaking out of that stereotype and worried about what other people think of us if we're not appearing to be robust. So even though most of us now have done enough work in this space to understand that resilience isn't about just toughing it out and toxic positivity and ignoring the bad, we still kind of can't help but a lot of our mental shift be stuck there, particularly when it comes to things like asking for help and saying, no, that's too much for me. And no, I want a sick day because I need to recover. So just as a really, really key point, that mental shift is more important than the knowing that resilience and robustness are not the same thing, right? So you've got fragile at one end of the thing, you've got anti-fragile, which is kind of one step further than resilience, whereby we're talking about being able to not just bounce back from a stressor, but use that stressor to become even better or stronger. But what we're mostly aiming for in real world is resilience, which is kind of the term we use for the bounce back. Everybody's heard that analogy of the rubber band. You stretch it really hard, you put a stressor on it, and yeah, it's stretched, but when you let it go, a good quality rubber band should bounce back to the same sort of shape that it used to be. A cheap rubber band that you can get 100 for 30 cents at Bunnings, you stretch it, you let it go, and then it's this kind of flaccid, floppy, intermittent bit of grossness that really doesn't do a very good job of tying anything. So that's a not very resilient rubber band. So we kind of all know that analogy, right? What we still struggle with is understanding that what that means is that if you are needing a week off because you're overwhelmed, that still counts as resilience. If you have a cry in the bathroom, that still counts as resilience. If you decide that you're going to have a glass of gin and eat the pasta carbonara tonight to cope with the day you just had, that still counts as resilience. If you are taking steps to be able to go, I'm not okay, I'm stretching the rubber band, I'm going to do the things that are required that it makes it easier for me to bounce back, that is being resilient. What most of us are feeling like is, oh, well, if, I had a meltdown in the staff room, so I'm obviously not that resilient, or, oh my gosh, I needed a week off because I just couldn't cope. That doesn't mean resilience. But the thing is, right, and this is where the key difference between robust and resilience come up. If you think about your rubber band versus robustness as a brick wall, a brick wall will hold, and it will hold, and it will hold, and it will hold, and it will hold. But when it comes crumbling down, it is so hard to put back together. And this is the real issue, is when we talk about burnout in our profession, what some people are kind of belittle a little bit, like, oh, you're a bit burnt out, take some time off. No, if you're genuinely burnt out because you've held it together for so long and so long and so long, and then it goes to hell, you can't put that back together with a week off. That is the whole point, is that if you are practicing resilience and you take a week off at the times that you need it because you are too stretched in your rubber band, and so you allow yourself the time to deflate, versus if you're trying to be a brick wall, you won't take the week. You won't do that. You'll go on, and you might last for a year. You might last for 10 years. But when it cracks, the recovery period from burnout for many people is 6 months to 3 years. It's not just take a break. And this is why it's so important to understand that if we don't start doing better at refusing to be the brick wall that holds everything up no matter what, we won't be able to do it indefinitely. And you kind of, oh no, I'm a really resilient person, I've got this, I can do this. And most of us are, for a year, for 5 years, for 10 years, but somewhere along the way, for many, many veterinary leaders, that's cracking. And it's bloody hard to put back together if you're not looking at it properly. The other terminology I want to use, just to make sure we're on the same page, because unfortunately I do a lot of work in resilience in our space and we've been talking about the wrong thing for a really long time. So, who's heard of compassion fatigue? Yes. Everybody's had some corporate EAP psychologist come talk to them about compassion fatigue. Well, I'm here to tell you it's a load of crap. Okay, so for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's almost certainly being used wrong. So compassion fatigue, that kind of, oh, we cared so much that we've no longer got any energy left to care anymore. That's almost certainly not what's happening for a couple of reasons. Firstly, compassion and empathy are two different things. We use them interchangeably incorrectly. And even though this sounds like semantics, stick with me for 1 minute. Compassion is I care for you. I care about what's going on for you. Empathy is I care with you. Okay. Now, the distinction there is when you are in something with someone, you are riding those same emotional waves. This is when we get secondary trauma. This is when we get the exhaustion of the emotional up and down of always having to be in an emotion with a person. Whereas compassion, the I care about this for you and I feel for you, we can have feelings, but they're not feelings like the person who's feeling them. So when you do brain scans, for example, of people who are feeling compassion versus empathy, people who are feeling empathy, it is incredibly draining and it is very, very fatiguing. Whereas compassion as an emotion, believe it or not, is actually quite satisfying. Because compassion tends to drive us to action. It makes, I feel for you. And because I'm not in the depths of despair with you, and none of us are good at problem solving when we're in the depths of despair, right? Strong emotions shut us down. They don't make us creative problem solvers. But if you go in compassion, then you're great at trying to fix the problem because you're not attached to the emotion of it. And so compassion satisfaction is a real thing. And in fact, a lot of people gain energy from being compassionate all day. People are very drained from being empathetic all day. So, first key point is that empathy fatigue is much more like what's going on. And the reason that matters is because you can actually notice yourself which of these things you're doing, whether you're doing empathy or compassion, and you can step back from the brink. You can recognize this isn't healthy that I am in this with them anymore. So this can mean your patients, this can mean your staff who are having a difficult time or a toxic culture or somebody who's being bullied. This can also mean people in your personal lives as well. Now, don't get me wrong, empathy is powerful. We are mostly empathetic people who went into this profession, and there is a great time and a place to apply it. But if that's what you were applying all of the time, and your emotions are doing this because you're the emotional dumping bag for your team and your client and your family, that is exhausting. So, key point, notice whether you are using compassion or empathy, whether you are in it for them or with them, because you're going to be better at helping them and you're going to be less exhausted if you try to notice before you tip into empathy. The second reason that this terminology is unhelpful is because of all of the vets that I coach, it's often not actually what's going on. And that's the real irony. You know, people who come in from the outside, psychologists who do studies on the veterinary profession, who tend to kind of go, oh, well, euthanasia must be very emotionally exhausting. Whereas I don't know how many vets we've got in, you know, 62 people we've got out there now. Most vets I talk to enjoy a nice, fulfilling euthanasia. They get that compassion satisfaction out of it. They get the joy of being able to ease the burden for a family and an animal. And when you're coming in from the outside, this looks like the stressful part of our job, and it's what a lot of them study, but it's wrong, right? So most people that I talk to that are at the ends of their tether for burnout, industry specific, is actually experiencing what we call moral trauma. Now, moral trauma is a term coming out of the US, where, of course, their human medical professionals have many of the same challenges that we as veterinary professionals do. I'm based in Australia. I know I've got a couple of UK people here. Anyone from? I don't know any of you from America, but obviously, you know, they don't have the great medical security systems that we have. And what that means is you've got doctors and nurses who have trained because they want to help people, and then they're left having to leave people bleeding out in the waiting room because they can't show insurance papers, or they have to medically bankrupt people to, replace a kidney, or families have to choose between losing their home and saving their kid. And what they find is that every time that a medical professional has to act in a way that doesn't align with their morals, they have this tiny, tiny little what they call moral trauma. And those things over time, when you do brain scans of people experiencing a lot of moral trauma, actually on a brain scan looks very similar to soldiers coming back from war with PTSD. It actually creates a brain injury. And that's no small thing. So us in the veterinary industry, now whether we're talking about our actual patients where we have those tiny little moral traumas for those who are still clinically practicing as well as leading, and you're having to euthanize for, convenience reasons, but as most of us know, that's less common than us believing we should euthanize and the owner not being ready yet, or just not being able to practice the kind of care you want, or having to do steroids and antibiotics instead of the sort of care that you think is required, or having to watch an animal in pain because an owner can't afford a cruciate surgery. Those little things. Now add to that leadership, especially corporate leadership, where we are constantly in this kind of middle manager awful quagmire of having to instill what our leaders want onto a team who we know it's not going to help. We're just constantly experiencing these tiny little moral traumas. And the thing with moral traumas is they leave a residue. So you go up with this kind of trauma and then you recover, but you leave this tiny little bit where you're not quite back to baseline most of the time unless you do the work. And what that means is that most people that really snap and have a massive burnout and are off work with undiagnosed PTSD half the time, it's over something really little. It's a tiny, tiny thing that does it because they've got this residue building up over time. And the final time is something that they've dealt with 20 times before. It's an angry client who yells at them and accuses them of just being in this for the money. And that's it. That's the end of it. And they are now off. And this is what moral trauma does to us. So I hope you're starting to see, even though I hate to spend a lot of time talking about academics, that the words that we've been using for the better part of 2 decades in our profession aren't actually very helpful for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we're not speaking the same language to each other. And secondly, we're not getting the right help. If we are trying to stop people being compassionate and talking to them about that, as opposed to helping them articulate and notice the difference between empathy and compassion. But also, if somebody really is feeling overwhelmed with all of this and goes to their EAP provider and says, I've got compassion fatigue, and that person applies a whole bunch of strategies to try to help them with compassion fatigue, where what they're really suffering is moral trauma, doesn't fix the problem, right? So this is why semantics matters, and it matters for us as leaders to understand for our teams. But of course, you guys are here today because we need help too. And so being able to know what's going on in your head is a really powerful first step. Why does it matter? Now, this is pretty obvious, but the key point is the one at the bottom. Clearly, we want to be more resilient and more well for our own personal well-being. For our health, everybody knows what chronic cortisol looks like. Imagine a small white fluffy dog with Cushing's. That's what chronic stress looks like. Obviously, the more well we are, the more our team and our organization succeeds. But what I find is there's still a whole bunch of veterinary leaders out there who are so passionate and so invested in what they do that none of those things seem to be this way enough to get them to take better care of themselves. So the fourth one that I want to offer you is because most of us went into this, well, we went into the veterinary profession to help animals, and we went into leadership because we wanted to make things better for our people, right? And now you have choices every single day, which is help one more animal, have one more difficult conversation with the person, support one more person who needs to vent about something, do that one more thing that those staff really want from me that I think will improve things for them. And you do help. And you help that small little thing every day. You help that one animal, you support that one person, or you do make that great change today. And maybe you make a few of them this week, and maybe you make a bunch of them this year. And those things are all important. But the problem is if you keep doing those one extra things every day, every week, you will eventually in a few months or a few years, or even in 2 decades, you will be done. You will be burnt out and you will give up. I am watching the mass exodus of veterinary leaders from our profession right now for this exact reason. And so my question to you has to be, if you went into this to help people or animals, what is the best way of doing that? Because a short career helping extra animals today and this week is not going to do as much good as a long, fulfilled, and engaged career because your job is sustainable. So if I can't convince the 60-something of you who are here today, and hopefully the extra 100 of you who are signed up to watch this afterwards, to look after yourself for your own sake, then I want you to really go back to the core values of why did you take this job in the first place? Because if you are genuine about making that difference, then you need to be in this job for a long time. And you need to be able to sustain the workload that you're doing. And that is why I'm telling you, put your own oxygen mask on first. Yeah. Now, you guys know this stuff, right? I am not going to talk about the basics of self-care. I know you've all had this stuff. I know you've all Googled this stuff because you're smart, valid professionals. But just to make sure we all agree that sleep, nutrition, exercise, relationships, and hobbies are important. Yes, everybody knows that, even if it's not easy to do it compared to say it. The one thing that I want to stress here is small steps, okay? If you set yourself a target of doing all of these things and suddenly I'm going to go on a diet and I'm going to go to the gym every day and I'm going to, go out and join 6 different clubs, in 2 weeks from now, you'll be exhausted, you'll fail at it, and you'll feel even crappier about yourself than you did at the beginning of it, okay? So pick a little thing to start with, okay? Go to bed 10 minutes earlier. Plug your phone in a different room. I put mine in the same room because I like to go to sleep listening to podcasts, but it's over the other side of the room. So I have to get out of bed to put on a new podcast or look something up in the middle of the night. Nutrition, yeah, it matters. Exercise, yeah, it matters. Hobbies that are not animal related, because if you've still got your vet hat on when you're out riding your horse or you're volunteering at an animal shelter or you're going to dog trials, you've still got your vet hat on. So try really hard to check those hobbies that they are actually fulfilling your cup, not draining from it. But this is the one that I would stress. If you can only find the mental energy to focus on one of them, the science for all of these things is clear, but this one is the one that we have lost the most in the last decade or two of society. And there's clear evidence that loneliness is as bad for your health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I'm not kidding. Morbidity and mortality rates amongst lonely people are about the same as chronic smokers. So if you are getting 2 hours of sleep a night and you are eating crap chips out because you're drinking with your friends all of the time and you miss your netball game in the morning because you are building strong, positive community relationships, I am all for that plan. This is the one that if you've only got energy to do one thing, I would say this. Yeah. Do they work? Yeah, there's evidence that this stuff actually makes a difference to us. But the really important thing is that you can't yoga your way out of the impossible expectations that are placed on leaders these days. It actually really doesn't matter how much of these you do. We're still overwhelmed. So that's the next section. All right. What I want to really talk about is shifting from just surviving, getting through the day, towards hopefully doing a little bit better than that, because I don't think that surviving our profession should be the aim. So firstly, I want to talk to you about positive psychology. Remember I said there was going to be a tiny bit of fluffy stuff? This is the only part, all right? And I only want to put it in front of you so that if you're interested, you can go and look up more, all right? I'm not going to preach positive psychology at you. I just want to put it out there as an option so that if this is up your alley, you know what to go looking for. So most of us have heard of toxic positivity, yeah? Like, just look for the bright side and where's the silver lining, and, what you manifest, whatever you put out into the world, and it's crap, okay? There's pretty clear evidence that, in fact, forcing people who are in a negative mindset to be positive makes them more negative. So toxic positivity is an unhelpful thing. Positive psychology is something different, though. Positive psychology is where, over the last 2 decades, they've kind of realized that there's been 150 years of psychology study on mental health pathology. All right. So we're looking at people with actual mental ill health. And psychology as a profession has been 100% just trying to get those people up to baseline. With people with mental ill health, how do we make them feel normal? Now, in the last few years, psychology has gone, well, is that enough? Is normal enough? Or why don't we take learnings from the people who are thriving the most and try to get this baseline set of people to do a little bit better? Maybe we can shift the baseline. And what does that look like? What does that even mean? Now, the best analogy I have for this, this is where we get a bit woo-woo. It is a little bit of a painful analogy. I'm not into flowers, but it is actually the best one I've heard, so I'm going to share it anyway. If you have a garden, told you I was going to get fluffy. You have a garden, right? And all you focus on is pulling out the weeds. All you do is, oh my God, weed, I've got to get that out. Oh my God, I want to make my garden nice. Pull out all of the weeds, pull out all of the weeds. And you spend a lot of your energy getting on top of the weeds in your garden. Now that's worthwhile. Weeds are annoying in a garden and they're not great for your garden. But if you spend the whole season pulling out weeds, you get to the end of the season and what have you got? Well, possibly not many weeds, but where's your flowers? What did you plant? What did you spend time cultivating the things that you wanted in your garden, right? And so it's effectively the same with our minds. We spend so much of our energy trying to manage our negative things that are going on, and we're not planting any flowers. We're not doing the work to actually find and cultivate the good stuff in our life. So then, of course, when we get to the end of the year, we kind of feel like all we've done is pull the weeds. We're just exhausted from trying to keep our heads above water, right? So this is where the analogy becomes, let's start thinking about spending some of our energy planting flowers, not just pulling weeds. All right. Now, the difference between toxic positivity, which would be all about like, only look at the flowers. There's only flowers here. Ignore that there's any weeds. This is actually about acknowledging that they're there. They're part of life. We have a couple of weeds in our garden. We're more than happy to talk about them, but we're going to spend the same amount or more energy looking for and seeking out and creating the flowers in our life, right? So I'm going to leave that with you. That's the only woo-woo I'm giving you today before we move on to really practical stuff. But it is really worthwhile trying to look into some of those mindset shifts. Next up, boundaries. Good stuff, yes. We all have heard about it. We've all been told we need more of them. We've all been told, take less work home with you. Don't skip your lunch break. Leave the building. And all of this really unhelpful, unrealistic crap in the real world. So let's actually start talking about what that could look like in a way that works. So there's a few different things that I would encourage you to do. Firstly, boundaries that are the brick wall are a lot like resilience that is robust. Okay. When you've got a brick wall boundary, a hard boundary, as I call it, it'll hold for a long time, maybe, but when it breaks, it's really hard to put back up and it's really painful. So I tend to encourage people to think of their boundaries a bit more like we think about resilience as the rubber band, or I tend to say a trampoline. You will end up working late some nights. You will end up skipping your break some nights. You will end up taking work home with you or taking a phone call on the weekend. We know, unfortunately, that is a cost of our jobs. The challenge is looking at that like your trampoline, not your brick wall, so that when people hit it, it's not upsetting for you and upsetting for others. Instead, we go, oh, crap, okay, I missed my lunch break because either, somebody called in sick, so I had to jump in and do my clinical work instead of my admin work, and then I had to finish my admin work at home. Or if you're still clinical, I had to stay late because a blocked cat came in at 5 minutes to closing time. And rather than allow that resentment and frustration to build up, we go, okay, well, I'm here 2 hours late today. I am going to take an hour and a half of that back. I'm going to finish early on Friday, or I'm going to, save that up as toil. Now, we all theoretically think we're saving up toil, but none of us really do. Okay, so what I want you to start thinking about is, how are you going to take responsibility for the trampoline of your boundaries? Now, hard boundaries are important too. I have one hard boundary, and that is that I don't answer the phone. I don't look at my phone or respond to emails between 6:30 and 7:30 at night, because that's when I'm putting my kid to bed. And that's pretty hard. All right. I did once answer the phone during that time, and it was on the day that the lions got out of their enclosure at the zoo. And people were allowed to break my boundary that day. But for the most part, my teams have always known this is not okay. However, I also have some soft boundaries. Like, I don't work Wednesdays because kid's not at daycare. It's the time that I spend with her. Now I've got choices. I could see an email come through my inbox on a Wednesday and get angry and resentful about, oh no, I'm always working and I'm always doing things and I can never get a break. Or I can just ignore it and spend the whole day stressing about what I'm going to say when I get back to the desk tomorrow. Or I can go, okay, well, I've got a couple of emails I need to respond to on Wednesday. I'm going to put the kid in front of Frozen for half an hour, but I'm going to finish early on Friday afternoon and take her to the park after daycare. And not only does that actually allow me to be more realistic about the demands of my job, it also removes the frustration and the resentment from my Wednesday, because frankly, the resentment is more exhausting than the doing of the thing. It's that frustration about having to do it that is more mentally draining. So, first tip, hard versus soft boundaries. Decide what you are and communicate them, okay? Because we don't all have the same manual about boundaries and people don't know. I used to have one, for example, that if I'm always available, I am your leader. I, of course, acknowledge that you want to be able to contact me when things go wrong, and I'm here. But I will never be checking my emails on a weekend. All right. I turn off my work email push notifications. If you need me to look at an email, or if you need me, you have to do me the courtesy of phoning me. Because when people have to phone you, they're more likely to try to think of their own solution first, because they don't want to have to phone you than just fire off a text message. But also because that means I'm not just watching my emails in case something's important and something needs my response, which we all know means that we just quickly respond to that and quickly do this, or there is a big one that we can't respond to right now, but then we spend the rest of the day stewing over it. So communicate your boundaries with the team. All right. Doesn't mean you're unavailable unless you want it to be. But what does that look like for you? Technology as well. We all think that we're victims of technology and this inability to disconnect, but I'll be honest with you, that is a choice that we make. You can leave your phone in your bedroom unless it is part of your contract that you need to be available. And the new right to disconnect laws mean that they need to be paying you an extraordinary amount of money in order for you to be exempt from the right to disconnect laws. So I'm assuming for most of us in our profession, we are not paid enough for us to fit into that category of exempt, which means you are the one who is creating the requirement to have your phone available all the time. Leave it in your goddamn bedroom on charge. Leave it in the car when you go for a dog walk. Don't have it with you. And use it to your advantage. Use the 2 SIM card thing. Use the push notifications only between certain hours and the away hours. Stop allowing us to be victims of our phones and start taking control. I know that that is easier said than done. I am more than guilty of a little bit of phone addiction as well. And I notice when I'm tipping over, this is unhealthy now, and I have to really go back all the way to reset. But it is something that we do have more control over than we like to believe. Just like any addiction, it is harder to do than to say, but it is still on us to have to do it. All right. Any more than somebody who's addicted to smoking. Yep, you can say all you want that the government should make it illegal. They probably should. But right now it's on you to have to choose to not buy cigarettes. And that's the same with our phones. Policy and process boundaries. What that means is having enough policies and processes around the things that continue to exhaust you that you don't have to hold your boundaries anymore. The policies do it for you. So whether that is in your clinical space, what sort of things we will accept at 5 minutes to closing time, or at what point we do accept it, and teams as a whole agreeing what's a good reason to interrupt me in my lunch break. Blocked cat, yes. Somebody bleeding out, yes. Customer is mad, probably not, actually. So start to think about, as a team, ways to protect you from having to always say no, because this is written down stuff and people just can hear the expectation before they even get to it. If it takes a bit of a reset, well, then you'll have to do some work to start with. But new people coming into your organization should just know, this is what we call you for on the weekend. This is who you call instead. This is what problems you're expected to solve yourself. This is when we'll stay late. This is when we'll interrupt a lunch break. So start agreeing those as a team. All right. And then lastly, on the boundaries, I want to talk about emotional boundaries. All right. Not just the time and the how much we've got on our to-do list, but the people that are using you as their emotional dumping ground. Does that resonate with many? Yeah. Yes, Sarah. Yeah. Yep. I know where you're coming from. Okay. So if you are the emotional dumping ground for your team, this is the sort of stuff we need to start thinking about, is how are you going to role model good boundaries with your team while still feeling and appearing available and having an open door policy and I'm available and approachable, and these two entirely conflicting demands of leaders, which is just not fair. That we live in this age where we're expected to have open plan offices and always available open door policies and get work done. Yeah. So some tips. Okay. This is where coaching, if you've ever done any training in coaching, this is one of the big things, is not fixing their problems for you. Just stopping being the fixer. Refuse to be the person who fixes everybody's problems. Okay. And start asking, well, oh, that sounds quite hard. What are you doing about it? Or, oh, that does sound like it would be annoying. How would you like to fix it? If you really want to, you can say, what support could I offer you to fix it? But still being really clear is, what are you doing about this problem that's a big problem for you? I often say things like, my to-do list is booked up till about next February. I'm happy to add it to my to-do list. But if you want it done sooner than February, it's on you. Okay. I've also gone so far as to be a little bit mean and just frankly say, hey, why are you bringing me the error code from the washing machine? Like, I'm just going to Google what that means. Why can't you Google what that means? All right. So the gentler way of saying that is, oh, what does Google say about that error code? And just placing this assumption that they should have brought to you a solution and have fully formed what we're going to do about it before they just come to you with, oh, the washing machine's not working. All right. So how do we use words that don't sound as standoffish as sometimes I have found myself being in the past, but are quite clear at setting the expectation of, what does Google say about that? Oh, what have you tried so far? What do you think we should do next? Who could you ask for help on that? All right. So trying to get across that we expect the other person to fix their own problems. Next, actually trying to ascertain when they're coming to you with, oh, this person was mean to me, or this person said this, or I'm upset because of this. Actually trying to work out, are they coming to you as their manager and they actually need your management help? In which case your job is coaching. Okay, unless we're talking about an actual complaint, in which case obviously you need to take steps and do an investigation and whatnot. But even if it's an actual complaint, the first question should be, what have you tried so far? Okay, but we really need to work out, are they just coming to vent at you and they don't want solutions and they're not going to go away and do anything about this? That person's always blah is a vent. I need help with how to resolve an interpersonal conflict with Blur. Now this is a coaching conversation. Okay. So if they are just coming to vent and you want to, okay, you choose to find time, you can just be like, oh, I've got a break in my diary at 4. Happy to hear you out then. Or if you are more close with this person and have some sort of personal friendship, well, why don't we go out for coffee, on the weekend? Because that doesn't sound to me like a work problem. All right. If they actually want advice, they're coming to you for like, what do I do about this? I'm stuck. then okay, talk to me about what you've tried so far, and then we can work it through together. But if they just kind of want like a hand holder, then that's okay too. But just be their hand holder. How can I support you is different to I can solve that problem for you. So try to work out what they actually are coming to you for. And if it is just a vent, send them away. No, you don't have to do it meanly. You can just do it by simply saying, oh yeah, and what are you going to do about it? And then they're kind of like, oh, I don't know. I don't really want to. Oh, okay. So this sounds like a you problem. Bye. I know we're not going to say that, but you get the idea, yes? You do not have to take on all of their emotional baggage. When this isn't a one person that keeps coming to you with all their problems thing, and this has just become a like people just, oh, quick, can I have a word? And can I ask you just this? And can I just have a minute? And I just need this one little thing. All right. You just start going, I have an open door policy between 12 and 2. What is the hours during which people can bring you all of their crappy little problems to talk about? Clearly communicate it. Block off the other time in your diary as you are getting stuff done. All right. So you can be, in America, I think they call it office hours to just kind of, I'll be at my desk and you can come and ask me things. But that doesn't mean you have to be open door policy all day, every day. That's not the same. And it's not a reasonable expectation. Remember, modeling boundaries, because you're not going to change the culture if you don't do it. All right. So when somebody comes to you with problems that do feel like, okay, well, I actually need to help you with this, you don't have to help them right then and there. Hey, this sounds like a big deal, and I really want to give you the focus it deserves. Let's make this the priority at our one-on-one on the weekend, on Friday. Let's make it clear I want to help you. I am here for you. But there's a time and a place for this conversation, and we have that assigned to us. Yeah? Okay. And last but not least, know when they're out of your hands for helping. If they are coming to you with a lot of mental health stuff or some of the stuff around compassion fatigue, empathy fatigue, moral trauma, burnout, actual mental ill health diagnosed issues or undiagnosed challenges, this is when we need to get better at differentiating. I am your manager and I care, but I am not your mental health professional or your life coach. Okay, so this sounds bigger than me. Let's talk about what support you need. Or this sounds like more than work. Are you getting help elsewhere? Do you need help brainstorming what we could do next? Do you need time off tomorrow to see your GP to get a mental health care plan? Yeah. So make sure that you're not being pulled into the conversations that A, are not in your expertise and shouldn't be, but also that clearly demarcates, I care, but I am not your therapist. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I go backwards. Last but not least, I want to talk about strategic disengagement. All right. What that basically means is you need to care a little bit less. Hard, hey. It's not as easy as it sounds, but it is pretty vital in this day and age because if we are constantly bombarded by everything that matters, then nothing can matter, or our brains just fry. So strategic disengagement is the act of choosing what's important for you to engage with. So my first one, I'm a really big passion. Some of you, I know a couple of you found me through my busyness epidemic stuff. I'm a really big believer that we are trapped in this cycle of being overwhelmed and busy, partly because of society, but partly because once we get stuck in it, the adrenaline of always being busy and always being overwhelmed is not addictive in a way that we think it's giving us a high, but it's addictive in the way that when we turn it off and we suddenly do have downtime, we don't know what to do with that. We are stuck. And that is where things become a real big problem. So I really want to talk about how we stop this being the case. All right, because we all know that, okay, I can see two male names somewhere. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. No, we've got a couple more blokes on Facebook. So I don't mean to stereotype, and I'm sorry. But particularly as women and mums, we do end up being the mental load juggle for like everything, right? So we've got this kind of intense job where we are everybody's everything clinically half the time, as well as administrative, as well as leadership, as well as all the people problems. And then we've also got to remember our car needs a service, and the kid needs the dentist, and we need new socks, and we've got to pay the power bill, and I haven't had a hairdresser appointment in 3 years, and the mother-in-law's birthday is soon. Like, just the sheer amount of things going on in our head becomes pretty darn overwhelming, right? So here's some of the tips that I want you to really take into account. Firstly, your impossible to-do list is called an impossible to-do list because it is impossible. And there is a lot of freedom in coming to terms with the fact that it will never, ever be finished. Because when you let go of the belief that you can do your impossible to-do list, it's easier to not feel like you should constantly be chasing it. And that means on a Sunday afternoon when you decide, I really need a break, but there's like 40 million life admin things I could do, I'm never going to get the 40 million things done. So why not just enjoy the break? Because there'll still be 40 million and one tomorrow, and that's not really going to make a difference to my life in the end. If anybody's into this stuff, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burke is one of my favorite books of all time, which really, really challenges you to overcome your addiction to trying to get through an impossible to-do list. But mostly what I really want you to think about is, if you can't do everything, which you can't, what would be the two things that if you finish today and they're not done, you'd be quite disappointed in yourself? Two, only two. What are the two things that will really be upsetting if you finish today having not done them? And do those two things. And everything else is a bonus. Everything else is just, oh, cool, I also got that thing done. Now pick two things for this week. Only two things that you have to achieve this week in order to feel good about the week, right? You may also want to do it for the year. And very, very, very importantly, you might want to do this for your life. If I get to the end of my career or the end of my life and I am sitting in a rest home looking back and nobody's visiting me, what are the two things that I will be disappointed that I didn't do? Because then everything else just becomes a bonus. All right, I really want you to reframe. You cannot do everything. So strategically choose what will fail this week or this month. And that might be the laundry's going to fail this week. And, I'm just going to do bare minimum at work this month because it's my kid's first week at school. Or I'm going to order Uber Eats or HelloFresh every day this month, even though I'm poor, because I've got this big thing coming up at work and then I'm going to save money afterwards. Choose what's important right now and focus on that. Secondly, I want you to opt out of the busy equals important competition. Back in the old days, it was like a mark of status to not be busy. If you were the aristocracy, hurrying was very unseemly. It was a mark of how important you were that you had so much leisure time because you had plebs to run around you and be busy around you, right? And then the Industrial Revolution, and now we live in a hustle culture where being busy is kind of seen as being important, right? That's a mark, and that's why we one up each other on, I'm so busy that I did this. Oh, well, I am so busy because of this thing, and I haven't had my lunch break in this long, and I haven't had this, and my kid was up for 4 hours overnight. Well, my kid was up for 6. We're kind of always trying to one up each other on how busy we are, right? Because it suggests that we are valuable. I want to suggest to you that the ultimate sign of a great leader is that you are no longer needed, and that you can go away on a 3-month holiday and the world will continue without you. Sure, maybe nothing will evolve without you, but everybody will know what to do and the clinic will still be there and almost as profitable as when you were there, right? You should make it the mark of being the most important person in the room because you are obsolete now. All right. That is how you know you've won at life. All right. And how you know you're a great leader, because you have empowered your people to do this without you. Lastly, I want you to think about the words you use. Remember that positive psychology babble before? This is true because the more you repeat something, the more we fall into the psychology trap of every time we talk about how busy and overwhelmed and stressed we are, the more we believe it, right? So what I want you to do is shift your words. This is something I encourage you to do with your teams as well, because it stops that one-upmanship martyr culture of who's skipped the most lunch breaks. All right. So firstly, do you have to talk about how busy you are? Why is it that when you're asked how are you at the moment, we all just say busy as our default response? Pick a different thing to talk about. Oh, how are you today? I'm a bit hungry actually, or I've got a sore foot. Like whatever, just it doesn't have to be about this. But if it does, if busyness is the right conversation for now, then firstly, I want you to talk about busy and. And what that means is I want you to add to the rest of the sentence, what have you done to contribute to the world with your busyness? Why was your busyness worthwhile? So that might mean busy and I saved a life this morning, so we're still catching up because we got a bit behind with that cesarean. Or busy and I know that that customer really appreciated the extra time I spent with them on that euthanasia. Or busy and I'm so pleased I made the time to go to my kids' school rehearsal this morning, because you should have seen her face when she saw me in the crowd. What did you do that makes your busyness a worthwhile accomplishment? Okay. And if you can't come up with a busy and a contribution to the world or to your life, to the life of someone else with your busy, then I need a busy but. Okay. Busy but I've asked reception to book me a break later on. Busy, but I'm going out with friends tonight and I'm looking forward to debriefing. Busy, but I've talked to my manager and I'm going to take next week off to recover. Busy, but I've booked an early finish tomorrow. What are you doing about it? Take control back about this spiral that's become this impossible thing to stay on top of, yeah? If you can't do any of those things, you need somebody external to help you rearrange your life. So, practical. What are you going to do like today about some of this stuff? I want you, most importantly, I really like the triple Ds. All right. I want you to every week at least, some people do it every day, but I want you to sit down. What are your top 6 tasks for this week? And then I want you to ditch 3 of them. Delegate it, delegate one of them, ditch one of them, and delay one of them. All right, because you won't be distracted by the really unimportant things. You'll be distracted by the nearly most important things. And that stops you from getting those 2 things that must be done this week done. For every new task you agree to, what are you going to delegate, ditch, or delay? And if your team member comes to you and says, I really need you to prioritize this, or your boss comes to you and says, I really need you to do this, just say, which thing do you want me to drop in order to get that done? I want you to have a worry parking bay. For me, on my phone, I have a to-do list on Microsoft, which means when I am mulling something over at 11 o'clock at night and I know that I'm stewing and, oh crap, I forgot to do this, and oh, this is what I want to say about that thing, I just write it in my email, in my to-do list, and as soon as it's in there, my brain can let it go, because I know I've got a fixed time to manage that thing at a later date and that my phone will remind me, so I don't have to carry the load. And I also want you to start noticing the difference between red flags and red mist. Red mist is basically just, there's an emotional flare up, there's a conflict in the team, there's a drama, there's a thing that's gone wrong. And before you emotionally give everything you've got to fixing that problem and really fully investing in that, wait and see if it's a pattern. Because if it's a one-off thing, yep, sure, address it and then let it go. Don't turn things into bigger than they are. Don't emotionally engage your energy until they are a pattern that is becoming a problem. One-offs, just work on it, fix it, move on. I have 1 minute left. My final thought is just do less. I do know that that is not that simple, but I really want to encourage you, given some of those tools and some of that kind of setup, you can do less, but unfortunately it's on us to have to do it. All right. I do just want to invite you, if you are struggling, like I said before, it's not a new phenomenon, but I'm just seeing this overwhelming amount of this at the moment. So I want to contribute to how we can solve some of these things with leaders and resilience and just not being okay. And so I'm trying to put together a bit of a group of people who want sort of foundational level leadership, how to make your leadership journey less emotionally exhausting. Like, how do we do scripts for some of the really hard parts of our leadership? And how do we have people to support us when it's lonely at the top? And how do we have people to bounce? Oh my God, this person's put in a complaint and I don't know what to do about it. What are we actually going to do for those people? But also that combines, how do we actually grow as a leadership group in our profession? And how do we stay well and not allow this expectation of what leadership is meant to look like to spiral so much that our jobs are impossible? But this is the first time I'll have run a program that combines the leadership piece and the resilience piece with kind of coaching and drop-in sessions and peer-to-peer messaging support and one-on-one mentoring. So the first time I've put those two things together rather than just a resilience cohort and a leadership cohort. So what I wanted to offer to you guys as the 150 something people who signed up for this, if you are interested in being part of that first cohort, I want your feedback. I want you to build it with me. I want you to tell me what you need. And so I'm going to offer you to be able to do it with me for effectively cost price, so 50% off, if you're willing to basically fill out a few surveys and give me some feedback on it, so that I can build what leaders really need into the future. So if this sounds like something that you could benefit from, the QR code there gives you a little bit more details on the plan, the concept, but I really want to run it with a first cohort of people who are really bought into making it a big success and are willing to be part of building that with me so that it's really what you need, not just what I think you need. So if you're that person, you want to do a couple of surveys, but be part of a group of mastermind people coming together to do resilient leadership, I'm calling it the Leading on Empty program, please get in touch. Okay, I'd really love to be involved. I have gone a minute over time. I have a tendency to talk too much. I apologize, but I'm willing to stay. If anybody has questions, I'm going to stop the recording so that obviously there'll be no recordings during this. And I see, Dr. Shibley, you've got a note taker on. I'd appreciate if we turn that off, or I might have to boot you out of the room so that if anybody that does want to ask questions or have a chat is not on a recording. Please feel free to stick around if you do want to ask things. I will stay, but I know some of you may have to run off. So farewell. Thank you for joining me. Best of luck. I hope that you get some peace in the next little while.